All right, welcome to today's lesson. So in this lesson, I'm going to be taking you through an inverted paradiddle sticking pattern. And I'm going to show you how to make some grooves. We're going to explore some ideas positionally on the drums about what we can do with this. So inverted paradiddle, this lesson is aimed at intermediate or advanced drummers. If you're a beginner, feel free to stick around because you get to see some of the concepts that we'll be using or that you'll approach later on in your drumming. And for now, as I say, I'm going to assume that you know what an inverted paradiddle is, what the sticking is for that. I'm going to break it down. We're going to move it around the drums, do some different stuff with it. So if you're at your drums, feel free to join in. All right. So the inverted paradiddle to start with. I'll play it on the snare, we'll get the sticking going to begin with, and then I'll show you these different steps that we can use to move this thing around. So it's going to go right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. So you'll notice that dynamically, I'm not playing it very evenly. So some of the strokes are at different volumes from others. Now this is done deliberately. If you're playing in a drum line or you're practicing this on a practice pad or whatever, you also want to be able to play it evenly. But for the purposes of making this into a groove, we're not worried about that at all. Timing wise, yeah, we need to be nice and straight with it. But in terms of the other stuff, not concerned. So what we're going to do with it is we're going to play it as 16th notes, right? So 16th notes, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Now you notice I'm putting a slight accent on the 2 and 4. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So already at that tempo it starts to roll a little bit. It starts to feel like a groove because you can hear the backbeat on the 2 and the 4 coming in. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pop the right hand on the hi-hat. We're going to play it in our kind of regular position, and I'll do it like that. You'll hear the two rhythms separate out. Sticking's not changed, still doing an inverted paradiddle. A little faster. Alright, so I'm going to add some kicks into that. Now don't worry too much about your kick placement. I'm going to put them in certain positions, but you can experiment with that, see what feels good when you're doing it yourself. Okay, here we go. Alright, so we've got a basic groove happening with it now. Now, just going back to the thing about dynamics, we don't have to worry about playing it really evenly. In fact, we don't want to because it's not going to flow. It's not going to be as useful as a groove. So I want this to have dynamic depth. I want it to be 3D, you know. I want it to be a little bit more textured. So we're getting the accent on the backbeat. And we're getting good separation between the way the hat sounds and the snare. And the left hand's doing these little ghost notes as well, so it makes it gives it an undercurrent, makes it feel like it's rolling a little bit. That's what we want. We want the snare to pop out on the backbeat. We want the undercurrent. We want to give it texture. The good thing about doing that is, as well, you'll kind of find your own way to it when you're practicing it. And that inserts your own sound or your own voice into doing this. So you don't want to play exactly like I'm playing it. Do your own thing with it. You know, try it out. Use my ideas as a basis to then develop it. And same goes for all the next steps that we're going to do with this. All right, so we've got that basic thing down. Next step, we're just going to move this right hand over. So we're going to put the right hand on the ride cymbal. I'm going to introduce a different sound, but it's the same thing. It's going to go like this. Alright, I think we've got a bit of a malfunction there. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we've got that, and it gives it a different sound. Now, just a word of warning about this. You're going to want to make sure that before you start breaking these into grooves and experimenting with them, you've got the sticking pattern under your hands. What I mean by that is that you can play it without thinking about it at all. You know, you can just do it. You're on autopilot. Because that way you can really pay attention to the textures and the sounds, and when you're creating stuff, you can experiment with it, move your limbs to different positions, and then kind of assess what you're doing. Does it sound good? Is it something you want to use or not? You can really think of it from that perspective. If you're busy thinking about right, left, right, left, right, there's too much to think about. And if you're in that position, you're not ready yet. You're not ready to move it around the drums. And that's totally okay. Just means you need to sit and work with it. Just work that pattern going. Get the, do it on a pad, do hands on your knees, whatever you want to do. Just get that thing happening. Once it's internalized, you're free to, really create something cool with it. All right, so there are a couple of ideas. The next thing I'm going to do is the same pattern. So positionally, I'm going to be in the same place on the right hand. And I'm going to move the left hand around a little bit between the hi-hats and the snare. So I'm going to get some more ghost notes in. I'm just going to alternate a little bit and see what kind of comes out. Okay, here we go. Okay, quite like that. Getting fancy there with displacement. All right. So all I was doing there is bringing some, left hand down, doing some different things. You notice I did a little displacement, so I actually changed the pattern there. That's kind of cheating a bit. That's next level. But I mean, if you're ready to do it, give it a blast. You can change the pattern from an inverted paradiddle and add, a standard paradiddle in there or whatever. You can go as far with it as you want to go to. All right, so the next kind of idea I want to look at with this is thinking about shapes. So once you've got the sticking pattern down, that's automatic. You're not having to think about that. You can just do it. Then we can start to experiment with sounds. And an easy way to do it on the drums, for me personally, is to think in terms of shapes. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So we've got positioning, and shapes is obviously, what pattern each limb is doing in terms of where it's going directionally on the drums, I guess. So one way to think about this shape is, let me just play a pattern and then I'll kind of explain how it fits in. All right, so what I'm doing there is I'm actually making a counterclockwise shape, right? So the left hand's rotating through this motion, so making a counterclockwise shape. That's something that's you can experiment with. And my rule when I'm experimenting with these things is that first and foremost, it's got to sound good. Like if I play it and it sounds pleasing, then I'm going to want to use that thing. Or find a place where I can use that thing musically. So that's the first thing for me. Does it sound pleasing? And the second thing is, does it feel good when I'm playing it? Now that didn't feel great to me actually, to rotate the left hand. It felt a bit clunky and awkward. And I haven't done a ton of practice on this particular thing. I don't normally play that pattern with the counterclockwise rotation in it. And maybe that's why it doesn't feel great, because I've just not quite got it internalized. I've not got it under my hands yet. That's a possibility. But sometimes things just feel good, like instantly. You play them, you're like, oh, that's cool. So for me, my kind of criteria when I'm exploring ideas in terms of deciding what I'm going to keep and pay attention to are, it's got to sound good and it's got to feel good. If it meets those two things, the chances are it's something I'm going to want to develop and practice a little bit. Because I can use it then. All right, so enough about that shape or rotation. I mean, feel free to give it a try, see what you think. You might find different. You might play and go, oh yeah, that feels fantastic. I'm going to use that. All right, so the other thing I can do, just before we move on to the next kind of shape pattern, is I want to insert a bit more texture on the ride cymbal. I'm not using the cymbal very dynamically at the moment. So what I mean by that is I'm going to start to play the edge a little bit and the bell, and I'm going to do that with the basic kind of pattern in this position. So maybe something like this. All right. So again, I'm looking for depth of sound. Just experimenting at the moment, seeing what's good, seeing what works. I've got no conceived idea about any of this stuff right now. I'm just in the experimental stages with it. So that's something I can do. I like that. I like the way that felt when I played it. I like the sound too. So finally, talking about shape, I'm going to take you through my favorite way to play this. And that's to kind of make a reverse L shape. So I go from the hat to the snare to the tom to the snare to the hat to the snare. So I'm going to do this. Let me show you what this goes like. Oh yeah. I like that. I like the way it feels. I like the way it flows. I like the way it sounds. So that's another kind of cool way you can use it. So just one last thing before we sign off with this is really think about when you're experimenting. As I said, get the pattern first and foremost under your hands. That's crucial. And then just noodle around with it, you know. And by that, just move your limbs. See what happens. Stuff like... Okay, I didn't know where I was going with that. Okay, so you can just shift it around, see what comes out when you're doing it. I know it sounds a bit like first time you hear these kind of patterns, it's like, whoa, it's really complex, and you know, there's a tendency to, well, for me anyway, to kind of overanalyze these things sometimes. That's why I try and create that rule for myself, and not just for this type of pattern, for anything I'm doing where I'm experimenting with ideas, fills or grooves. I get the sticking pattern. I always go from that foundation. Take the sticking pattern, move it around, see what I can do with it, see what I come up with. The trick is really, one of the tips I say to all my students is try and record what you're doing as much as you can, because if you're anything like me, you play these patterns, you might come up with something amazing and then just walk away from it and it's gone. You've forgotten it, and you know, that's kind of a waste of time. It's not a good productive way, I guess, to approach things. So just before I sign off, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to explain that all these lessons that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be looking at a lot of rudiments and sticking patterns. So it's going to be leaning towards, you know, intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced kind of players. I want to explain a little bit about the way I approach it. My philosophy about rudiments is I'm not a big I play a lot of rudiments. They're very, very useful. I'm not into rudiments in and of themselves. I'm not kind of rudiment geek. What I like to do is I like to approach them like tools. So I want to get them down, but I want to get them down so that I've got a tool, and my personal interest is like, what can I build with that? You know, what can I build with that tool? That's where I'm going with rudiments all the time. So it's like that. I'm more interested in what I can do with that thing than the thing itself, because that gives me a broader musical application, I guess, for what it is that I'm playing and all the hard work we put into it. So I always approach it from that angle. Otherwise, you end up doing these things where you're sitting down with the practice pad, you're flying these rhythms, you're flying them off, and you're like, yeah, that's great, it's fast and it's flowing. But so what, you know? Unless you're using it to do something with, then again, it's just my personal philosophy on it and approach. I'm not trying to kind of ram that down anyone's throat, but that's just the way that I do it. It's a way that makes most sense to me. You'll decide for yourself. The other thing is, when you are approaching these things, as I say, as soon as you've got it under your hands, get onto the drums with it. Start exploring. See what you can come up with. See what you like. Find a way to record your ideas. You know, it could be voice memo on your iPhone or whatever. I use that a lot when I'm, you know, just trying not to forget an idea. So that's something too. And finally, please, if you enjoyed this video and found value in it, please like and subscribe. This is, well, it's not a new channel, but the teaching aspect of it's new. It's something I'm going to be doing a lot more of. Things are gaining some traction, which is great, but I need to get the subscriber numbers up because I want to do some live stream lessons. That's something I really, really want to do, and I can't do it unless I get to 1,000 people. So please, if you liked it, subscribe, and then I'll keep you updated. Don't forget to hit that bell either, and I will see you in the next lesson.